In this video, I'm going to talk about Ryan Anderson again. Now, this is a bit of an update on the last review or roast because basically this guy, and I have to be honest, he's not really a Christian as he claims. Well, I mean, look, I'm struggling to understand. He claimed that he got back into cussing. Now, how can you get back into cussing if, like he said, he's 5 years without cussing? To me, that don't make sense. So, is it? I mean, could he be lying? And I mean, personally, I think he is. And also, he's claimed that he's been saved by Jesus, and he's got a deep connection with God, a relationship. Now, I mean, I don't believe it. I'm sorry. I mean, I'm a bit skeptical about this because how on earth are you going to waste 5 years of being obedient and not swearing, and suddenly you're telling your audience, actually, hold on, I need you to pray for me. I've started cussing. Now, this makes me look, I mean, you should look really bad, and you're teaching this. So I'm sorry. I mean, this is totally unacceptable as a Christian, and B, a teacher preaching to your audience who, as I said, you're meant to be at a much higher level. Oh, even if not much higher, you're still meant to be at a higher level, and you're meant to be helping them, not struggling with something you're teaching. I mean, have you gone cuckoo up there? Because it seems like you really have lost it, Mr. Anderson. You know, I've lost respect for you for that. And also, my duty as a real no swear master teacher is to expose fake Christians like yourself who, I mean, look, I got no problem with your knowledge. Your knowledge is great. But then, you know, what's the point having great knowledge if you can't apply it? I mean, look, it don't take brain surgery or a scientist to know some scriptures and repeat them. Most people can do that, even non-Christians. They can memorize a few scriptures and then say, well, look, do you follow this verse? you know but it doesn't mean that they're practicing themselves. And this is the problem I have now. How on earth did this happen is my next question or query, I suppose, which you haven't answered. You just told me on Instagram that, oh, well, it's between me and God, and the main thing is I'm stopping. But again, how do I know this is true now? You've you know you've burnt your boats with me, Mr. Ryan. How can I ever trust you now after what you claimed? I don't even know if it's true. Have you really been repenting? Are you really serious? Are you not making the whole thing up? How am I meant to know? And how am I, going to gain your trust? Because, it seems very strange, you know, that you would do this. And, I'm not really at all. I should really unsubscribe to you. And the only reason I'm not is because I'm just interested to see, if you really know what you're doing. If you're going to really say something that's totally against your scriptures or something. But, as I said, there's many people that have this knowledge, and, knowledge is good, but, it's useless if you can't apply it. And, I respect people even that don't know these Bible verses about, stopping cussing. like Ephesians 4:29, you know, and 5:4, I believe, and James, and you know, all these different scriptures. Colis, what is it? It's a long one, Colossians or something, and you know, James, and all the rest, Ecclesiastes and whatnot. But look, I am claiming that I'm great at memorizing Bible verses. You know, I mean, obviously I know the basics, Mark, Matthew, Luke, John, and whatnot. But I'm not pretending to be a scholar. But what I do is I apply what I know. And I think that's the main thing, even as, say, someone is agnostic and doesn't swear, well, they don't need to know, the exact verse, but they're applying it, which is, for me, even more important. Then later they can learn the verses. But you see, it's more embarrassing if you know the verse, like you claim, and you're still struggling, then something isn't right then. And also you're telling your audience, well, you know, you shouldn't be cussing and whatnot when you doing the same thing too. You're not following what you're teaching. You know, you've lost it, mate. You've lost it up here. You know, and I'm sorry. I've got to be blunt. I've got to be brutal because like I said, my style isn't to sugarcoat and to make you feel like you know ego massaged and that sort of stuff. No, no. I'm very honest, and I'm I'm strict, and you know I'll do this to my own kind as well. If it's a Hindu, if it's Indian, if it's white, black, it doesn't matter. you know my policy is it's the same that applies. If you're going to teach, and if you know what you're teaching but you don't follow, then I'm going to come down on you like a ton of bricks. Oh yes. I've already, one Indian on Instagram was cursing, well, repeated a curse word, and I really, I laid into him. I roasted him. So, it doesn't matter if you're the same religion as me, if you're different. I will research and I will pull you up. So, Mr. Anderson, please don't make a mockery out of Christianity, and, don't demean yourself, please. You know, you've already embarrassed yourself, and I mean, yes, you've got many followers, and you've done, obviously, to get the followers, you must have done something right. But the minute you admitted that you fell back into cussing, you should lose many followers as punishment. That's what I believe, anyway. As I said, I don't want to, build your ego up too much and make you feel like, undeserved praise. I mean, praise is fine. I'll praise you when you deserve the praise. And, I was all, for you when, before you started this cussing, and you told me, well, you told your audience in one video that you promised your mum that, you stop cussing, you know. So at least you reassured me, and I thought, okay, so this guy, all right, he's made a few mistakes, but he's corrected them now, and now I expect he won't go back to his own rotten vomit. And then, a month later, here comes the big bombshell that you've gone back and you don't know, and you're smiling. You don't look like you're taking it seriously. You should be crying. You shouldn't be laughing or smiling like it's, some sort of joke. You know, you should be crying. This is a serious matter. It's not a laughing matter. All this, doesn't really make me think that you're a serious Christian. You've probably been making a lot of this stuff up. As I said, a real person who is devoted, and who has a strong relationship with Jesus and God, like you said, they're not going to, go back into this cussing or whatever habit they promised God, that they're going to give up. They're not going to fall back, no, no, no. And if they do, then I'm sorry, but they're a fake Christian and they're going to, the dark place, the inferno, you know. It's much worse, it's a much worse transgression, to promise and breach that promise to God because, especially that's why many priests are also going to hell because they got the knowledge, but they've broken a serious covenant with God, a promise. So they're going to a worse place than lukewarm Christians or people who are not familiar with the Bible. Because at least you can say, oh well, they weren't aware, as I said. So yeah, so you better be careful, son. You know, I really, I have to be honest, and I'm going to keep a close eye on your videos. I'm going to see if you really are, what you say. Um, as I said, I really should unsubscribe until you get your 5 years back. So it'd be a long time. It'd be like 2031. And, that's a big waste. I'm sorry. But, I just can't believe this, you know. I've seen in my time, people that have claimed they're not, swearing, but, for someone at that level, to throw that all away, it's just disgusting, really. Under no circumstance, even if your life was threatened, you know, you should never, ever, promise God something and then go back and, really, put a massive block on your blessings and even look, even if you are materially successful, you ain't gonna get into heaven. One mistake like that gonna be held, really, really, accountable for your rotten mistake. So, I'll be watching you though, because can you get it back now? I hope so, and I hope you can redeem yourself. But as I said, I never really want to see this happen again. I mean, other people might be gentle with you and, say, oh, well, we all make mistakes and this and that, but it's still not good enough because, yes, we all make mistakes, but, you know, we don't, and you yourself were saying, not to abuse God's grace and mercy and use willful sin as an excuse to keep sinning. You yourself said it, and well, I knew this long ago. I've come across many, many Christians who have promised and said, well, I'm not going to do this, and but we all sin, so it's not a problem. But are they really trying to stop? So you won't be the last, and you're certainly not the first to admit that. But for someone who claims they've been saved by Jesus, as your username title is, you sure don't make me believe that based on, your admission. You exposed yourself, no one else did. You exposed yourself, Mr. Anderson, on that video. And as I said, I mean, look, I don't know really what's going on in your mind and heart, but it didn't really seem to me by your smiling and, you didn't really seem serious. You probably thought it was just like, blasé, that, it's no big deal. So you don't strike me as a very serious Christian. I hope you can prove me wrong, though. And I do hope, as the real master of this not cussing, that you do get back to that level once again, and then you'll gain my respect. Okay, well, that's all for tonight. Goodbye.